if you would please have out your science notebook and let's start graphing variables today. I'm going to share my screen with you. I'll be writing on the document camera today. This lesson is being recorded, so if you find that Ms. Neville's going too fast or anything, please feel free to watch the recorded lesson at the end. Naomi, can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
So in your notes, let's write down graphing variables. Remember, we learned about two different variables. Can someone unmute themselves and tell me, what does IV stand for?
Independent variable.
Very good, Marley. The independent variable. Can someone different tell me, use your notes, what is the independent variable?
Dependent variable.
What is the independent variable? What is it?
The one thing that can be changed.
Yeah, that's what you have the power to change. You can manipulate it as the experimenter. Now, someone already told me, say it again for me, unmute yourself. What does DV stand for?
Dependent variable.
The dependent variable. And can someone different please tell me what is the dependent variable?
The ending result.
It's our ending result. It's our outcome because we changed something with our independent variable. So today we're going to work on graphing these variables. In order to do that, I want us in our notes, this doesn't have to be huge. We're going to draw a T-chart. On the left side, we're going to write an X, and on the right side, we're going to write a Y. Any numbers that I find on this side, on the left side of my chart, this is what I have changed as the experimenter, or this is the independent variable. Anything on the right side of this chart is my dependent variable. Okay? So today we're going to work with graphing these variables. And you may wonder, why do we graph variables? It's important for us to know that one, science and math are close cousins. They're very related because math helps to show relationships. So, star statement in our notes, graphing helps us to show relationships between the independent variable and the dependent variable. Take some time to finish writing that down. So when we're graphing, we're going to use a line graph this week when we're graphing variables. And it's important for us to know that the line graph is going to be able to show us how the independent variable is related to our dependent variable. I'm going to move this up and get rid of my orange. Okay. So what we're going to see here is we're going to draw our line graph. The horizontal line or axis is my x-axis. The vertical line or axis is my y-axis. Please write this in your notes. Now, while Ms. Neville's using marker, It's important that you use pencil today. It's because as we learn how to graph, we may make mistakes. So you want to be able to easily erase it. Okay? So this is my x-axis and my y-axis. To help you remember this more, put up one arm. X, 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 Y, 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 Y. So my y-axis is my vertical axis. My x-axis is my horizontal axis. When we're graphing here, I'm going to move this up a little bit more. Perfect. When we're graphing, we graph our independent variable on our x-axis, and we graph, one second, let me write it, our dependent variable on our y-axis. So to add to our little chant here, our little kinesthetic activity, X, 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 Y, 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 Y. Independent, 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 dependent, 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 dependent. Our independent axis or independent variable will be graphed on our x-axis. Our dependent variable will be graphed on our y-axis. Okay? So we want to have that in our notes. You'll see this 0 here. This is our point of origin. Almost if we were in a race, this is our starting point. Okay, so we're going to put our 0 there, and we want to label that as our point of origin. Take some time to finish that up. And let's look at our first example together. Now, remember last week we took some time identifying the independent and dependent variable. So we're going to do the same thing here today. Let's look at an example problem that we're going to graph together today. Okay, so we're looking here and we see that a student has started to grow a plant. We'll find that the amount of time the student had this plant in the sunlight caused that plant to start to grow or its height to increase. We'll see that the longer she had that plant in the sun, the higher its plant's height went. Its plant's height increased. So over here, remember everything on the left side of our chart is our independent variable. So I would highlight that as my independent variable. And on the left, on the right, this is going to be the plant's height. That's our ending result. That's our dependent variable. So now let's graph this. We have our chart here. Now we're going to work to graph this in a line graph. So, move this up. Perfection. We'll cover up number 2. Okay, so let's draw our line graph here. Remember, we're going to create our X and Y axis. We're going to create our X and Y axis. Now, because, trying to keep our numbers on there, because we are just learning how to graph in quadrant 1 of this coordinate plane, it's going to be important that we continue to label our X and Y axis. Now we have to figure out what we will name this axis. Now remember, what variable, can someone unmute themselves and tell me, look back at your notes, what variable goes on the x-axis?
Independent variable.
The independent variable. So the amount of sunlight we highlighted as our independent variable. So at the bottom here, we're going to write amount of sunlight in hours. Can you write that, please? I'll move that up so you can see it a bit. So if our independent variable goes on our x-axis, what will go on our y-axis?
Dependent variable.
Our dependent variable, or the plant height. So here we're going to write plant height, and that is in inches. So what numbers or intervals, I'll move that up for you, what numbers or intervals will go here? What numbers would I use? Someone turn on their mic and tell me what you think.
1, 2, 3, and 4.
And did you get that from here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We're labeling our axes. How would I label my y-axis?
1, 1, 2, 2.
Oh, somebody said 1, 1, 2, 2. Miss Neville's going to politely disagree. We're just going to do 1 and 2. You'll see what I mean in a second. So now we have our line graph created. Okay, we have our line, the basics of our line graph created. I want to share with you how we're going to create that line, because that's what we're missing right now. Well, if we look back up here at our chart, this gives us our ordered pairs. Do you remember from math when we did graphing? 1, 1 is our first ordered pair. So that means on my chart, I would move to the 1 on my x-axis and then up 1 on my y-axis. And my first point would go there. Can someone turn on their mic and tell me what's my next ordered pair?
2 and 1.
2, 1. So I'm going to move over 2 on my x-axis and up 1 on my y-axis and put my second point. Someone should be able to see here why we didn't do 1, 1, 2, 2. Okay? It's creating that straight line there. We'll talk about what that means later on. And how could I forget? Because our plant wasn't growing at all in the beginning, we have to put a point at our point of origin. That 0, 0 should get a point here. That means there was no plant growth in the very beginning. What's our next ordered pair?
3, 2.
3, 2. So I'm going to move over 3 on my x-axis and up 2 on my y-axis and put my point there. You should too. And what's my last ordered pair?
4 and 2.
4, 2. So I'm going to move over 4 on my x-axis and up 2 on my y-axis. And I've got my last plot there. So now this is a line graph. We have to connect our dots to make our line. Ms. Neville's going to do this with a pencil. No, I'll do it with I'll be brave. I'll do it with a marker. Okay. So I'm going to connect my dots here. Okay. So what we see here is some straight lines here, some straight parts of the line, but we see some parts where the line goes straight up. When a line goes up, does that usually mean increase or decrease?
Increase.
Increase. In this case, the height of that plant stem increased. So if increase means up, that line going up means it's increasing. And if that line was to start to go down, that would mean
Decreasing.
decreasing. What does a straight line mean? Someone unmute themselves and take a guess.
Stay the same.
Very good. This means no change or stayed the same. So when we look at this line graph, because on the past test, you won't have to make your own line graph, but you will have to be able to look at a line graph and tell Ms. Neville what's going on. So when we look here at this line graph, it's important for us to see, to be able to write a conclusion. In your notes below your graph, write that word conclusion. For our purposes as a 6th grade scientist, our conclusion will always start with the word as. And what we want to talk about is what mostly happened in this chart. What mostly happened and how the amount of sunlight, our independent variable, is related to the plant's height, our dependent variable. What we see here is as the amount of sunlight increased, what happened to the growth of that plant, guys? Someone tell me.
As the amount of sunlight increased, the plant stayed the same.
It did stay the same in some places, but it also did what?
It grew a lot.
Yeah.
It increased in height.
Yeah, very good. So as the amount of sunlight increased, the plant's height increased. This is where we talk about the conclusion. The job of that conclusion is to tell us the relationship between that IV and DV. How did that IV help that DV to change? Go ahead and write that down, please. We're going to do one more graphing together. Hopefully you'll be a little expert at it, so you'll be able to go ahead of me. But if not, you stay right here with me, and that's okay. It's okay to be wrong. We're just learning this song, okay? Please make sure you're muted. Okay? Let's look at a second graph that we're going to make. Okay? Let's look at a second graph we're going to make. If we look here at number 2, straighten that up for you. Now we're looking at the amount of water. This is our independent variable. Remember, everything on the left side of that chart is my independent variable, and how that independent variable changes our sunflower's height or our dependent variable. So what we're looking at here is this chart and looking at the relationship between the amount of water and the height of the sunflower. We already see some ordered pairs here, don't we? Can someone tell me what's my first ordered pair?
10, 10.
10, 10. My second ordered pair?
17, 15.
Our third ordered pair?
22, 20.
And our fourth ordered pair?
31, 25.
Very good. So now, let's make our line graph. We have our x-axis here. We have our y-axis. Remember, we need to be labeling that as we're pretty new at creating these line graphs with quadrant 1. Remember, our IV will go on our x-axis, and our DV will go on our y-axis. Hey guys, someone unmute themselves and tell me, what should I name my x-axis? What should I label it as?
Amount of water.
Amount of water. Oh, look at Miss Neville using that chemical abbreviation. And what should I name my y-axis?
Sunflower's height.
Yeah, sunflower height. Smooth that up so you can see it. Now, here's possibly the toughest part. What intervals or numbers should I put here? The wrong answer is 10. No, hold, let me finish. I've not asked the question yet to you where you can answer. The wrong answer here is 10, 17, 22, 31. No, when we're putting intervals on a line graph, it's important that it has a set pattern, okay? If I were to just put 10, 17, 22, 31, there's no pattern there. So take some time and think about it. And I want someone other than Marley to answer what should be my intervals here. What numbers could I put here?
10, 20, 30, 40.
I love it. So I'm going to put my point of origin there. I didn't, so we're going to put that there. And then I'm going to do 10, 20, 30, 40. Can I show you a trick? When we're making that number line, because that's what that is, it's just a number line, I put big tick marks here to represent 10 intervals, or intervals of 10, and I'm going to put half size in the middle of those. If this is 0 and this is 10, what is this?
5.
5. If this is 10 and this is 20, what number is this?
15,
15.
This number?
25,
And this number?
35.
35.
Very good. So we've got our x-axis labeled. Now let's work on our y-axis, and that one's a little bit easier. What could I label that one? Not a trick question. What could I label this, my y-axis? Well, I would want to use intervals of 10 or intervals of 5 here. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And we've already done the hard work of finding our ordered pairs here. Put this up a little bit so we can see more of them. There we go. So let's look here. Remember, our first point is going to be 0, 0. That represents that plant didn't grow much at all in the beginning. But what's our second ordered pair here?
10, 10.
I'm going to find 10 on my x-axis, 10 on my y-axis, and put a point where the two meet. My next is 17, 15. So look what Miss Neville's going to do. 16, 17. You see it right there. 17, 15. And put my point where they meet. 22. I've got to find 22 on my x-axis. 22, 20. I'm going to find where 22 and 20 on my y-axis meet. And then my last point here, 31. Miss Neville put that little 1 there after 30. 31, 25. And this should be a straight line. And so that's what we see here. So the last thing we'll do in our live session today is let's write a conclusion here. Let's write our conclusion statement. Let's use our green. Remember, our conclusion reveals the relationship between our independent variable and our dependent variable. So remember, our conclusion will start with the word as. So as the amount of water increased, comma, the height of the sunflower. Someone unmute themselves and tell me what happened.
The height of the sunflower increased.
Very good. Okay. So this is a pretty tough concept. So if you struggle through some of this, I want you to know that we are not forgetting this. This isn't our first time hitting this today. We're going to be working with it for the rest of the week. Okay. So let's talk about what your graded assignments will be for today.